That afternoon, I arrived at my son's house with a simple, heartfelt joy, the kind that only a father carries. I was eager to sit with my children and grandchildren, to laugh, to share warmth, to feel like family again. In my hands, I carried a fresh apple pie, its golden crust still steaming, its sweet aroma rising like a promise of reunion. I imagined the children rushing into my arms, their voices bright with love, welcoming me as someone who truly belonged. But then, that sentence rang out, clear and ice-cold. A voice, sharp as ice, sliced through the air. "Why isn't he dead yet?" Just one sentence, and everything shattered. The warmth in my chest broke into shards of glass. My hand froze on the latch of the door. That apple pie, once a symbol of family and love, now felt heavy, like a cruel reminder that I was no longer wanted. Still, I stepped inside. I walked past glittering lights that looked festive but felt cold, past familiar faces that now stared at me like I was a stranger. No smiles, no words of welcome. Not a single glass lifted in my name. My son raised his voice and declared, "For family." But in that moment, I realized this family no longer counted me among them. Somewhere along the way, I had been erased, and from that second on, I knew nothing would ever be the same. Before we continue, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell because in the next episodes, truths will be revealed that you could never imagine. I heard it with my own ears, not muffled through glass, not passed along second-hand but sharp and unmistakable, cutting across the rusted iron fence. "Why isn't he dead yet?" A scatter of laughter followed, not loud, not even raucous, but sharp enough to rip something apart inside my chest. I stood frozen, holding a tray of warm apple pie, its steam rising like a cruel joke. The small joy I had carried bringing something sweet to my family dissolved into an ache that bit deep. My hands did not shake, not yet. I didn't turn back. I pushed the gate open and stepped in, pretending I had heard nothing. Strings of lights flickered restlessly overhead, too harsh, too revealing, catching every crease on my face, every heavy step I took. Music thudded from a speaker, pounding against my ribs as if to drive the old man out of their celebration. I moved slowly past the rows of wooden tables, past faces that never looked up. No one met my eyes. No one smiled. Some were blood relatives, others just guests, but all of them shared one thing: silence. Vanessa Hale, my son's wife, was the first to speak. Her voice was tight, sharp, force so insincere it was hard to know whether she meant it as a greeting or a sneer. "Oh, I didn't expect you to come, Arthur." I gave a small nod, steadying my voice into something calm. "I brought dessert." No hand reached out, no word of thanks. I carried the pie to the far end of the table, found a chair, and sat down. The metal groaned beneath my weight, sounding like the sigh of my own spirit. My back ached, but I held it straight. My heartbeat drummed against my ribs, my throat dry, my grip on the tray too tight, hiding the tremor in my hands. The smell of grilled meat drifted across the yard, tangled with mosquito repellent, while at the other end of the table beer glasses clashed in loud approval. Then Michael Hale, my son, rose to his feet, lifting his glass high, his voice ringing with false vigor. "To family, to the ones who are still here, to family." Harsh laughter broke out once more, glasses clinking together in triumph. Not a single one tilted in my direction. I raised my glass of water slowly, touching it gently against the emptiness before me. The only sound was glass meeting air, a hollow confirmation that, in my own family, I had become nothing more than a shadow. The apple pie sat in its tin tray, silent and unwanted, like an intruder who had slipped into the room uninvited. Its warmth had long since faded, leaving behind a crust gone dry and gray. If I traced a finger across it, the sugar would flake away in brittle patches, like dust falling from the frame of an old forgotten photograph. No one looked at it, just as no one truly looked at me. A boy in a blue striped shirt, clutching half a pastry, darted past and nearly collided with my knee. He tossed out a flat, sorry, the kind of apology people reserve for bumping into a lamppost, not a living man. I shifted slightly, my chest heavy with the thudding of a hammering heart. At the head of the table, Vanessa Hale's mother spoke in a booming, clipped voice, her words cold, her tone rehearsed, determined to nail her presence into the room. This party is perfect, a golden memory, if ever there was one. Her voice was a blade, cutting the air clean, denying every crack, every fracture, splintering this family from the inside out. I murmured back, not looking at anyone, my words thin and small, swallowed by the crowd. There are many memories, indeed, but my words dropped like a pebble tossed into a canyon, swallowed whole, with no echo in return. Michael Hale moved around the table with the ease of a man who had learned early that warmth could be performed like a role on stage. His hand landed briefly on shoulders, his polite smile rising and falling like stage lights. When he neared me, those eyes that mirrored my own, barely flicked in my direction. Cold, distant, gone before they even paused. "Father, what a surprise to see you here." It sounded less like a greeting than a pointed reminder. I lifted my gaze toward the corner of the yard, where the old oak tree, my tree, still stood. Its leaves shivered gently in the breeze, whispering to the past. When Michael was 8, he used to name each of the lower branches, treating them as his comrades. "This one's Calvin," he would say, patting a knotted burl of bark, "and this one's Coach." Back then, he would climb higher and higher until Margaret Hale called from the porch, her laughter bright and warm, soaked in love. "Michael, keep at least a few feet on the ground." I can still hear that laugh, gentle and full, a sound that made belief easy. Michael only half obeyed, one foot anchored to the tree trunk, the other swinging free into the open sky of his dreams. I had trusted that such moments would tether father and son for a lifetime. But now, beneath the same oak canopy, the boy who once called me Dad stood turned away, raising his glass to others, as though those memories had never been. And in the thick, stifling air of that party, I realized, memories are not always the threads that bind, they can just as easily be the knives that carve betrayal deeper. Vanessa Hale clapped her pale hands, each finger gleaming with oversized rings. A thin gold bracelet jingled at her wrist, not like a bell anymore, but like the rattle of chains locking an invisible door. She turned to Michael Hale, her smile radiant, the smile of someone certain the game was already won. "Before dessert," she announced, "just a quick word." Michael stepped forward, his rehearsed smile frozen in place, his face a mask polished to perfection. "We've loved this house," he began, and in that instant my chest tightened, my heart stuttered. It felt as though the ground slipped out beneath me, leaving only a hollow chasm. But it's worn out now, a place no one would really want anymore. The market is strong, and we're ready. We're putting it up for sale. The yard seemed to lose all its air. Then came the applause, not warm, not kind, but sharp, shattering, like glass breaking inside my ears. A whistle here, a hand clapping his shoulder there. Smart move. Time to upgrade. Leave the old burdens behind. Vanessa's mother let out a sound of satisfaction, soft but poisonous, the very sound of a long brewing scheme, finally landing exactly where it was meant to. I did not clap. I sat still, every rib in my chest counting itself down, each one knocking like the muted toll of a private funeral bell. "This house," I spoke, my voice low and steady, time to cut through as the cheering began to fade. "The best truths are delivered without a tremor." Michael met my eyes for half a second, then turned away. "Dad, we're ready. It just takes too much work to maintain." "Maintain?" I repeated, tasting the word slowly, bitter on my tongue. Maintenance was the frozen pipe I fixed at midnight, when winter bit through copper and the basement drowned like a bad idea. Maintenance was clearing the gutters the day after Margaret Hale's funeral, because storms do not wait for grief to subside. Maintenance was climbing the roof to prune the oak branches before they snapped, before they crashed onto the bedroom ceiling, the room where Michael learned multiplication, and where he first learned to lie. I felt blood rushing to my head, but I pressed my lips tight. I knew if I opened them, I would howl in the middle of this masquerade of a party. Vanessa smiled small, cold, the kind of smile reserved for tenants overstaying their welcome. Arthur, what's the point of clinging to those hollow memories? We need more space, something modern. You understand, don't you? I understood. I understood better than anyone here. The past had its own scent, fresh paint from 1992 when we remodeled the kitchen, chlorine from the plastic pool in the summer, Murphy's oil soap rubbed into the staircase banister until the wood shone like piano keys, and above it all, the laughter of Margaret, echoing so warm it cut into me even now. And the future? The future reeked only of paper, for sale signs, offer sheets, closing contracts. Paper cold to the touch, punctuated by the sharp click of a pen pressed too hard, as though to prove the writer truly meant it. In my mind, those papers were never contracts. They were shrouds, burial cloths to lay over an entire life over Margaret, over the family I once believed, foolishly, could never be broken. "Were you ever going to tell me?" I asked, my voice hoarse, eyes fixed on Michael Hale. "You weren't supposed to hear it that way," he replied, shoulders stiff, though his tone tried to sound reasonable. "We were waiting, for a moment that would hurt less pain." Tonight felt like nothing more than a clumsy play staged without rehearsal. Vanessa Hale turned to the guests, her crimson lips curving into a triumphant smile. "Dessert, everyone, we have strawberry mousse." Glittering cups of mousse appeared, their glossy pink cream shimmering under the lights. The children squealed in delight. And there, abandoned on the table, sat my cherry pie, silent, unwanted. It wasn't just a pie. It was time, memory, a piece of my heart, all of it dismissed in favor of these bright but soulless layers of sugar. "Vanessa," I said softly, "in the left kitchen drawer there's a pie server. You can use—" "That's fine, Arthur," she cut me off, her polite smile sharpened with cruelty. "Mousse is simpler, less mess." "Less mess? No less memory." Michael edged closer, awkward in his attempt to appear casual. "Dad, we were only thinking of the kids. You understand." I met his eyes, those hollow eyes that once mirrored my own. "No," I answered, my tone hardening. "I only speak the truth, the one thing no one else here seems brave enough to admit." Someone called for a group photo. Everyone gathered near the fence, tilting their heads, arms thrown around each other, smiles stretched tight like masks. The garden lights flickered, but their glow was cold, clinical, like the fluorescent bulbs of a morgue. "Dad!" Michael's hand lifted halfway, more gesture than invitation. "I'll take the picture," I said, unmoving. The photographer, some cousin or friend I couldn't recall, counted down. 3, 2. The group inhaled as one, chests swelling in rehearsed unison. I stared at them and wondered, did anyone here understand how precious a breath was when they had just placed a price tag on my entire life lower than a for sale sign? The music surged louder, drums pounding, laughter spilling out forced and brittle. The air thickened with pretense. I rose. The scrape of my chair across the patio sliced through the noise like a blade, drawing a few curious, irritated glances. I lifted the cherry pie with both hands. It was cold now, its crust hardened, an artifact of endurance rather than celebration. No one stopped me. That silence made each step both easier and more painful. At the gate, my hand touched the worn groove on the wood, the spot rubbed smooth 17 years ago, the one I always meant to repair. "No one will notice," Margaret Hale used to say, kissing my temple. When she was alive, this gate had opened to children's laughter and the smell of fresh baking. Tonight, it closed behind me, sealing off a lifetime valued less than the ground it stood on. "Good night, Arthur. Tomorrow everything will be fine," someone called after me, careless, as if bidding farewell to a man already gone. The night pressed in, damp and heavy, yet far easier to breathe than the suffocating air of that party. The road home was muscle memory, right at the stop sign, avoid the pothole by the blue mailbox, past 2 red lights, then cross diagonally at the crooked intersection everyone pretended was normal. I shut off the radio. I wanted to hear my car's real voice, the faint rattle in the dashboard when the fan ran on high. I hadn't fixed it. Some reminders you keep. My building welcomed me with the scent of old stairwells and the soft hum of lives unfolding behind closed doors. Apartment 2B, where Mrs. Doss lived, always carried the aroma of cumin. At the far end of the hall, Sunday night prayers drifted faintly through the walls. My own place was orderly, stripped bare, a single chair by the window, just enough for a man to sit without sleep, a lamp casting a solemn circle on the rug, a chipped magnet on the fridge that read, "Pay what you owe." Margaret had bought it as a joke, but it remained as a vow. I set the pie on the counter, peeled back the foil, and cut a slice. It held its shape, a small victory. But when I raised the fork, my hand felt unbearably heavy. The answering machine blinked. One new message. Michael's voice, hesitant, threaded with party laughter and music in the background. "Hey, Dad. Sorry about what I said earlier. This is the right decision for the kids. For us. You understand. Love you." Never once, in any message, had he called me Dad with his whole heart. Always, "Hey," wrapped in excuses, cloaked in cowardice. I poured coffee into a chipped mug, the one Margaret had glued back together, smiling as she said, "This isn't a museum. This is a home, and things are meant to be used." The aroma rose, but the bitterness wasn't in the cup. It was in my chest. I sat at the kitchen table, closed my eyes, and searched for the moment when resolve hardened from a word into a temperature. It wasn't the question, "Why isn't he dead?" though it had torn at the thinnest part of me. It wasn't the toast to family, a word stretched, twisted, weaponized. It was the house, the way they dismissed it with such indifference, as if an entire history could be packed away with winter coats and left on the curb. And in that moment, the silent ledger of revenge began, not written in ink, but etched in pain seared deep into bone. On the highest shelf of the hallway cabinet rests an old wooden box. Its brown finish has long since faded, its surface cracked like the skin of an old man who has endured too many winters. Inside, I keep the documents I consider my true muscle, not bone, not blood, but the quiet strength that makes the world move. There is the pension letter, a worn-out bank card, a photograph colder than the memory I still hold of myself. And there is the will I wrote 2 years ago, when a ruined knee left me bedridden and Michael Hale stood at my side, saying with startling calm, "Dad, you should get everything in order." In order for whom? I thought bitterly. For me to ease my mind, or for him to satisfy the greedy hunger waiting to devour the house I built brick by brick? The power of attorney is there as well, signed on a snowy day when the world outside had shrunk to 4 walls. Back then I believed "just in case" was a principle worth living by. Now I know better. Those papers are not safeguards, they are shackles, they are blades. I don't open the box. I know exactly what it holds. I will choose my own moment to face it. Instead, I pull from the kitchen drawer a blue-backed notebook. Its neat lines are a stage for an honest man, but tonight, honesty will wear the mask of revenge. I grip the pen so tightly that the ink presses through the page and scars the sheet beneath. At the top I write, "Note, keys, 2, accounts, 3, house." Around the word house I draw 1 box, then another, double-framed, like a grave outlined twice, guarded by my will alone. I remember that winter when the pipes burst. Vanessa Hale's voice shook on the phone, pretending at control. "Arthur, if you don't come right now, this whole house will drown." Michael was off at some luxury conference where people wore name tags and spoke only in empty verbs. I came. I held the flashlight for the plumber as he cursed at corroded copper, and I paid the bill. Michael promised to Venmo me back a word that sounded like a secret door. He never did. It wasn't a test, it was habit, my habit catching what others let fall. I placed the list beside the fruit bowl left over from the night before. At last I cut a piece of cherry pie, the last of it. The sweetness lingers bitterly on my tongue, like a gesture meant for the wrong hands. In my mind, I hear Margaret Hale's laughter. Then there's more for us. I glance toward the chair beside me. Empty. Cold. a wound that will never scar over. In the living room, the crooked wooden box that Margaret once called a place for little things that matter still leans on its tilted shelf. We had learned to accept its imperfection as fact. I open it now and take out a key tied to a red tag. On it, Margaret's handwriting, Dad, faded, blurred. In the lamplight it looks like a final summons. I turn the key in my hand. The metal burns with cold. It doesn't just open a door. It pries open an old wound that never healed. I set it gently beside the list, as though weighing fate itself. I load the dishes into the machine, press the button. The steady hum begins, repeating like the overture to a stage being set, not mere cleaning, but preparation for something imminent. The apartment drifts into silence. Only the low hum of the refrigerator remains, reminding me that the basics still persist. Yet the air is no longer restful. It is the waiting room of judgment, where a solitary man rewrites destiny. I stare into the dark, and for the first time, I say it aloud. Paper decides fate, and this time, it will save no one but me. Sleep comes not as a friend, but as an accomplice. 3:08 a.m. The alarm clock screeched faintly, its red digits blinking like a warning. The old building groaned around me, walls creaking with hairline fractures, the wind hissing through narrow cracks as if to remind me that cold never sleeps. I stood by the window, looking down at the empty street. A man in a bathrobe smoked on the sidewalk, his trembling hand holding the cigarette with a reverence that looked more like prayer. 2 cars idled at the red light, frozen in place, as though their drivers had forgotten they were the ones keeping the city alive. I pressed my forehead against the glass, let the chill slice into my temples, teaching me something close to patience. By morning, I brewed coffee in the small pot that made just enough for a single cup. It had always been honest about its purpose. I toasted 1 slice of bread, spreading butter all the way to the edges, because in kitchens that once held love, leaving a corner dry was nothing short of a crime. On the counter, the cherry pie looked less like a failure now, more like a reserve of strength. I cut a piece and placed it in a box, because even tomorrow deserves to be fed with kindness. The phone buzzed. A text from Michael Hale. Lunch this week? No day, no hour, no place. A dangling invitation, designed to last forever without ever happening. I typed sure, then erased it again. Precision is survival. I flipped the phone face down and let silence do the answering. I buttoned a shirt because serious decisions demand buttonholes. On the page of my ledger, I added 1 more line. House, silence. The pen carved deep, ink bleeding onto the next sheet. Not a sulk, a sentence. A declaration of war without words. Stepping out, I met Mrs. Doss in the hallway. She carried a pastry, the scent of sugar and butter faint in the air. "Good morning, Mr. Hale," she said, her eyes searching. I offered a smile no one could decipher, half polite, half cold, and answered, "Morning." This time I meant it. Outside, the dawn air was unnervingly still, as though the day was hiding a storm beneath its surface. I sat in the car, hands gripping the wheel. In my mind, Michael's face appeared raising his beer, but distorted, cracked like a shattered mirror. Behind it came Vanessa's voice from behind the fence, sharp, feigned sweetness hiding the blade. I understood now. A smile could be a license for betrayal. I did not need rage. Rage is for the weak. I would let the paperwork carry out the execution. It's time to take everything back, every key, every number, every brick, and I will do it without saying a word. The engine roared to life. On the passenger seat, the list waited, warming under the sun. The words on the page sat calm and absolute, like a ledger balanced to the final cent. I merged into traffic. The red lights blinked like checkpoints. The river of cars swallowed me whole, like a sentence already written. A bus exhaled wearily, a beast still forced to work. The city clamored, but I remained silent, dissolving into its current not as a man begging to be let in, but as one who no longer asked. They think I am just an old shadow clinging to memory, but soon they will learn it is the darkness that devours their false light. Sophie Hale had sent me a sketch, a house sprouting crooked legs, staggering forward, with the word overreach scrawled in bold beneath it. 16, and already sharper in satire than the entire city council. I texted back, lunch, Sunday, bring your best pencils, the binder could use a companion. She replied with a heart, and another drawing, this time a night sky in motion, walking away. By Saturday the farmer's market was heavy with heat. The air smelled of damp fungi, thick and musty, clinging to the skin. Knives hit chopping boards with sharp cracks, honey jars clinked in nervous rhythm, and the hawkers' stretched out voices carried like distant mockery. I saw Michael Hale before he saw me. He stood at the mushroom stall, his blue shirt wrinkled, the glint of a worn cufflink at his wrist. His cheeks were hollow, his mouth lined by worry. The phone was wedged between his ear and shoulder while he nodded at a slick man in a white shirt whose smile gleamed but meant nothing. When Michael hung up too quickly, his hand brushed the pocket of his shirt, a twitch, unconscious, as if afraid of losing control. Then he noticed me. "Dad," he said brightly, voice tuned for public spaces. "Michael," I answered, my tone flat, Winter Lake still. I looked down at the trays of mushrooms, maitake, shiitake, oyster luxuries wasted on the old steel pan back in my kitchen. Then I looked at the lines around his eyes, lines that hadn't belonged to him at 8 years old, but clung to him now like debts unpaid. "We should talk," he said, lowering his voice. "We are talking," I replied, "and this is the only kind of talk I'll allow." He leaned closer, the stench of cheap cologne and stale smoke clinging to him. "Did you call the city?" "I called for a tenant's phone number," I said slowly. She was afraid her child might fall through the rotting floorboards. His jaw tightened. "The family's falling apart because of you. Do you even realize that?" My hand stayed in my coat pocket, thumb grinding into the barrel of a pen as though it were a blade. "Number. Everything is simply falling into place. Truth isn't messy, Michael. You are the one who makes it messy." He let out a short, brittle laugh like the snap of a coffin lid. "I heard you bought something. A lien on the duplex." He spat the word lien as if it were filth. "That's right," I said. "Not a question." "Why?" "Because you behave as though paperwork only happens to other people," I replied. "And because interest is a teacher I respect." "That's pathetic, cowardly. Do you even hear yourself? Using paper to strike at your own blood." "It isn't cowardice," I said, my voice dropping heavy as a stone tossed into a still pond, silencing the stall around us. "It's mathematics, and mathematics has no sympathy." The mushroom vendor avoided my eyes, his fingers drumming nervously against the wooden crate as though afraid of blood. At the honey stand, a couple suddenly found the labels fascinating, though their ears leaned hard in our direction. "So this is revenge?" Michael's voice climbed higher, ragged at the edges. "No," I said evenly. "This is justice." He swallowed hard, then lowered his voice again. "We were going to include you in the sale, just not yet." "You already included me," I said, "the night you raised a glass to family without leaving me a chair. This is my reply." He glanced past my shoulder, searching for someone, anyone, to reinterpret me into something safer. No one came. "I'll handle it," he said at last, his voice trembling. He fumbled with his wallet, shoving it back into his pocket too fast, a crumpled receipt slipping out and tumbling to the ground. I stepped back half a pace, not to retreat, only to see him whole. And for the first time, I recognized the gulf that had opened between father and son, wide as a canyon. "Good," I said. "That's what adults do." He drew in a breath, as though ready to say something kind, something useful, but the words never came. Nothing remained that could mend what had already broken. On Monday morning, a letter arrived from Teresa Clark. The envelope was thick and weighty, its sealed edge slightly rough, as though pressed shut by ritual itself. When I tore it open, the smell of fresh ink rose sharply, an unmistakable reminder that this was no ordinary sheet of paper, but evidence. Inside lay the executed trust, notarized and recorded. Buried among the legal phrases was one clause I had underlined 3 times. No beneficiary shall claim division solely on the grounds of blood relation. Clipped to it was a small note, written in Teresa's precise hand. This sentence is how men like you can finally sleep at night. I slid the copy of the trust into the binder, the scrape of paper against plastic snapping, dryly like the click of a lock closing. I added a new label, Mercy, dated long ago. I doubted the law had a name for such a thing, but morality certainly did. Tuesday brought a call from First County Bank, the same place that had phoned last week to inform me Michael Hale had listed me as his emergency contact. The man's voice this time was taut, polite, but strained like a necktie cinched too tightly for too long. Mr. Hale, we're following up on our previous message. As the emergency contact, you should know that Jennings Contracting's loan is approaching review. We are still in talks with the borrower. I cut him off, my tone steady and cold. Erase every contact tied to me. Right now, I am no longer the shadow propping them up. Sir, we only meant, write this down clearly, I pressed, gripping the pen in my hand so hard the ink nearly tore through the page. Every power of attorney ever bearing my name is null, permanently. I am not a man to be exploited. A long silence stretched. The shuffle of papers, a breath held too tightly, and when the script in front of him no longer matched reality, even his voice cracked. We have the cancellation on file. The contact will be updated. Good, I said, my voice not raised, but heavy as a verdict. Then call the real borrower, the one who calls himself an adult. Let him sign his own name into this storm. I hung up and noted the date and time in the margin of the binder, right beside the words, First County, emergency contact erased. The pen pressed so deep it nearly pierced the page, ensuring no one could erase what I had written. Documentation, that is how you water the desert where others have forced you to live. Each word, each mark of ink is a blade carved into stone, silent, irreversible, undeniable. At Southwell Shelter, the air was thick with dampness. The ceiling was stained yellow, the concrete floor mottled with dark patches. Flip-flops slapped against the ground, children cried with voices already hoarse, as if hunger had long since trained them to whimper instead of wail. Around the room, weary faces huddled together, each clutching a plastic bag containing the few things left to call their own. Carla Nguyen, the shelter's director, a small woman with sharp, burning eyes, handed me a pile of donated bedding to sort. Then she guided a young woman to the table where I sat. I showed her how to draft a simple budget on a scrap of paper, a way to make numbers less of a crushing weight and more of a fragile fence to lean on. We can't rebuild your whole life today, I told her gently. All we can do is build a fence around the next 3 weeks. She smiled, a trembling, fragile smile like a shard of light falling into a darkened room. I like fences, she whispered. They keep out the goats. Or the children, I muttered without thinking. You really are funny, she said, and for a moment we both laughed quietly, but with a force strong enough to lift the suffocating heaviness of the room. On my way out, a flyer on the bulletin board caught my eye. Know Your Rights, Tenant Counseling, Thursday 5:07. I tore off 3 copies. The paper crackled in my hands like a reminder, knowledge is a weapon, and I knew exactly where I would post them. That night, the phone rang. Vanessa Hale's voice cut sharp and brittle, steeped in rage. Michael is drowning inspectors, banks, fines piling up. Are you proud of yourself now? Do you feel like the man holding the knife? I kept my tone calm, the way a verdict sounds when it has already been decided. Number, all I see is the naked truth being revealed, and for once, it's no longer in your hands. This is cruel, she snapped. Cruel, I said evenly, was turning me into a decoration, then laughing behind the fence when my voice was stripped away. She gasped, then spat out each word like venom. My God, you just love creating tragedies. You've spent your whole life casting yourself as the victim. I pressed my lips together, then delivered my reply with the weight of stone. Number, I simply arrived on time to reclaim what should never have been stolen. On the other end came a sound like a steel door slamming shut. Yet my apartment stayed quiet, untouched because that door had never truly been open. Before hanging up, Vanessa hurled one last blow. "If this family falls apart, it's your fault." I answered steadily. "A family that collapses over a few sheets of paper was never built on love to begin with, only on signatures." Then, silence. I let the dial tone hum until it faded completely. I opened the binder and wrote in the margin, "Vanessa attempted to shift blame." No response given. The ink pressed so deep it bled through to the next page, like a carving into stone. This was not pettiness. It was a record. I had endured too long, letting other people's versions of the story smother my own memory. Paper is how you keep hold of what is yours. On Friday afternoon, I stood in line at the county records office to file the lien certificate. The small room was crowded, the air heavy with the mingled scent of ink and old paper. Men in work boots, women in office heels, we were all playing the same game, only the shoes were different. When my turn came, the clerk bent over my file, then pressed her stamp down hard against the paper. The sound cracked sharp and final, echoing like a judge's gavel, transforming the cramped office into a miniature courtroom. She slid the manila envelope back to me, embossed with the county seal weighty as evidence. Do people ever feel the need to apologize when they have to use the law to protect themselves? I asked. Her eyes flickered with surprise. Sometimes, usually when they don't believe they have the right to act unless they ask forgiveness first. I don't apologize, I said. Good, she replied, nodding, as the stamp fell again, sealing the decision like a sentence etched into stone. Back home, I slipped the envelope into my binder. The dry scrape of paper against plastic sounded like a lock sliding into place. I sat for a long time without moving. Outside, the city carried on with its chaos, its endless noise disguising an emptiness. Inside, the quiet slowly grew into a shape solid enough to rest against. I boiled potatoes, reheated the vegetable soup Sophie Hale had insisted on buying the week before. Even artists know how to cook, she had said, as though determined to shoulder part of the burden. I ate standing at the counter. The kitchen table was buried under stacks of papers. While I ate, I pulled up the inspector's latest report online. Landlord contacted, repairs required, reinspection scheduled. Good. That was all I wanted, the system working the way it was meant to. My phone buzzed. A message from Sophie, a sketch of my hand enlarged, holding a sheet of paper as if it were a compass. Beneath it, she had written, "You have chosen your map." I propped the phone against the salt shaker and let the drawing watch me finish dinner. Better company than most conversations I'd had in years. For a moment, my nose stung with the sharp ache of being seen. My granddaughter had witnessed the path I'd chosen and confirmed it with her pencil. That night, I slept a real sleep. Not the restless half-dream since the party, but the kind of rest that silences the last thing you heard and only stirs again when the light is honest. The next morning, I brewed strong black coffee and set out a small pastry on a plate. The light that filled the kitchen was cold but fair. On a new page in my binder, I wrote 5 words, slowly, each stroke heavy as a hammer against stone. I am not a bank. A declaration, one that surprised even me with its kindness. I could not save Michael Hale from his deadlines. I could not carry Vanessa Hale across a collapsing floor she insisted was still sound. But I could hold my own papers, my own chair, and stand exactly where my name belonged. At 9 o'clock, I called the utility company for the duplex. I'd like my address added for all notices regarding the property, I said, reading out the account number as lien holder. Of course, the woman replied, her voice relieved. We can send you a courtesy copy. If courtesy only runs one way, I said, it turns into contempt. She laughed nervously, her voice brittle against the bureaucratic air. When I hung up, I let my hand rest on the plastic receiver an extra moment. There is a rare peace in speaking truth to someone whose job is to record it. You want a turning point? Here it is, and I never planned it. Henry Doyle called at noon. You sitting down, Arthur? I've been sitting all day, Henry. Bad knees, you know. What is it? Your son, his subcontracting outfit, is selling off overdue debt. A small package. The contract allows assignment. I stared at the phone as if it were a tool I'd never seen before. Debt-like furniture can be carried from one room to another without asking the chair how it feels. "How much?" I asked. "Not much," Henry replied. "Bad debt never sells at full value." "We'll do it by the book," I said. "No surprises, no threats. Just the calendar, the contract, and the interest they signed for in their haste." "You sure?" "I'm sure." He raised a glass to family without saving a seat for me. Now I keep a ledger where I actually belong. That afternoon, as the sun swept across the kitchen, turning the dust into something briefly beautiful, I wrote a letter, not to Michael, not to Vanessa, to myself. "Arthur, if they call you cruel again, remember this. You destroyed nothing. You only pulled your hands away from bailing out ships they refused to patch. You signed your name where it belonged. You let the law check what needed checking. You bought time. You did not sell your dignity. Hold the fence." The yellow lamplight pooled across the desk, stretching the words long. I slipped the letter under the tab marked "Control," because control without kindness turns men into stone, and I am not granite. I am a man with a polished teapot and a granddaughter who draws my hands as if they matter. That night, Michael called again and again, panicked. His lease had been reassigned. His bills came from strangers. His deadlines were shortened. I listened, then answered calmly. "Adults live with their signatures. No signature is innocent." He shouted that I was cruel. I corrected him. "Not cruel. Calculated." He hung up without saying goodbye. I poured tea, bit into the pastry, and stood by the window, listening to the automated voice repeat the new terms: neutral, indifferent, undeniable. Late that night, Sophie arrived. She handed me an envelope from Michael. I did not open it. Instead, I labeled it, "Not yet." Sophie nodded, satisfied, as though comforted by the sight of something placed exactly where it belonged. I added a note and stuck it on the envelope. "Open only when there is nothing left in you that needs to win." And I told myself, bitter yet proud, I have already opened every door that needed opening in my life. The rest will rot shut on their own. Night fell. Sleep came quickly, because the day had been spent completely and spent well. The pounding on the door landed like hammer blows against a coffin, harsh, relentless. The hallway fell silent. The television next door clicked off. Breaths were held, as though everyone waited to see if blood would spill behind the wood. I opened the door, not hurried, not startled. I opened it as if I had already seen this scene written in the script. And indeed, the face of Michael Hale did not surprise me. Sweat soaking through his shirt, eyes bloodshot, his hand trembling even as he tried to clench it into a fist to preserve the illusion of anger. He looked at me like a drowning man who had found a life preserver, and yet hated the very thing keeping him afloat. "You," he spat, the word thick, heavy, like dust gathered in 1,000 neglected corners. "Me," I answered, my gaze cutting straight through him. "You bought the debt. Don't deny it." "I hired someone to enforce the contract you signed yourself," I said, my voice calm, cold. "Lies aren't necessary." "You could have just called me," he growled, breath ragged. "We could have," I replied evenly. "You had a phone. You had years." "You want to ruin my life," he hissed. "No," I said, each word dropping like stone. "I simply stopped letting you use my life as the life raft for your sinking ship." "This is revenge," he tried to shout, but even he didn't believe it. "No," I said, "this is clarity, and clarity feels cruel to those who've thrived in fog." "You're killing me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I refuse to die in your place," I answered. "That's the difference." He slumped back, sliding down against the hallway wall. His hand scratched lightly at the wooden door, leaving thin marks, like a man drowning, clawing for anything to hold on to. "You taught me to be better than this," he said, clinging to his final script. "I taught you the value of things," I replied, "including the price of disrespect." "You want to see me fall?" His eyes burned, caught between hatred and despair. "No," I said, my tone low, steady. "I want to see you stand without leaning on me." He swallowed hard, nodding once, like a man hearing a verdict he had already half expected. "Fine," he said. "I'll pay. I'll fix it. I'll sell. But don't expect." "I don't expect," I cut him off. "That's why I sleep well." And for a fleeting second, through the beard and fury, I glimpsed the boy of 8, the boy who once named the branches of the maple tree and believed roofs were eternal. But the image dissolved, replaced by the 42-year-old man before me, exhausted, furious at the one who had stopped patching his sinking boat. "Close the door," he said, his voice cracking, almost like a plea. "I will," I answered, gentle, but final. I shut the door slowly. The click of the lock echoed like the closing line of a chapter. My hand lingered on the wood for a heartbeat longer before I let go. On the other side, I heard Michael choke, half curse, half prayer. But I didn't open the door again. Because for the first time, I chose to be a father strong enough to let go, instead of a man sacrificing himself until his soul was gone. That night, the knock on my door sounded different, no longer furious, but more like a quiet plea. The yellow light spilling through the crack of the door stretched into a thin line across the floor, and the night air slipped in with a chill that carried the metallic scent of the handle. I opened it. Michael Hale stood there, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes rimmed red. His steps were slow, as though afraid any movement might shatter the fragile space between us. "I won't stay long," he said, his voice low. He lifted a white envelope, his hand trembling. "Here, I made the 3rd payment. On time. The first time I've ever paid anything on time without hiding, without leaning on you." "I know," I replied. Henry Doyle had already called me, repeating the phrase that gave me quiet satisfaction. "Updated." Michael's gaze drifted toward the brass mail slot on the table, and he gave a small, salt-stung smile. "We used to slip our Christmas wishes in there. Now," he swallowed hard, "I only slip in my regrets." "Your mother always liked scheduling even the horses," I said, and a sharp warmth stirred beneath my ribs. He drew a long breath. "I haven't opened the USB," he confessed, his eyes reddening as though each word was a knife drawn across the last shreds of his pride. "It's still on the counter. I once thought I'd use it to win an argument, but then I realized I don't need to win, I just need to finish." I listened. No nod, no smile, just stillness, because I knew confessions are as fragile as thread. He tilted his head toward the kettle. "Tea," I said. We stood in the kitchen, each of us holding a cup as if signing a silent treaty with the warmth of the steam. The faint clink of spoon against porcelain rang out like a small bell, calling for a change of shift in the soul. "I went to the house," he said after a sip. "I didn't go in. I just stood outside long enough to say goodbye to the old version of me, the one who thought owning more meant being bigger." He laughed, but it wasn't joy. His voice cracked like a string that had been wound too tight, snapping at last. "Now I'm smaller, and somehow that fits better. You'll grow in the ways that matter," I told him. "Not through numbers or property, but by holding on to what makes you human." He drained the cup, rinsed it, and set it back in its place, like paying a small debt to order itself. Before leaving, his hand rested on the file folder, not opening it, only touching it, then pulled back, as though it was still a wound he couldn't face. 90 days, he said. "Lunch?" "Lunch. My treat," I replied. "Lunch. My treat," I replied. "My treat profess. My treat profess. My treat profess. My treat profess. My treat professed. My treat profess. My treat professed." At the door, he paused. "Dad." "Yes? Thank you for not using the recording." "I didn't need to," I said. "You already heard it." He nodded and left. The door closed, and the apartment exhaled a long, warm breath. It was no longer a cold cage, but a chest that rose and fell with the rhythm of a family reborn from ashes. I listened to that breath and realized I no longer measured silence for danger. I measured it for peace. The mailbox filled up during the following week, as it always did. On Tuesday evenings after class, we sat and read the letters, the nurses' notes, electric bills, grocery lists. even an apology from someone who used to hog both washing machines out of self-importance. We wrote replies. The landlord upstairs, also the landlord downstairs, in other words, ours too, joined a meeting and said, as though discovering a sentence he should have spoken 5 winters ago, "I'll turn the night temperature down to 20 degrees Celsius." He fixed the laundry room door. We brought donuts. Sophie Hale adjusted the bikes. Mrs. Dass's mother wrapped a red scarf around her shoulders, left behind with a note that read, "Warmth." I pinned Evelyn and Thomas Carter's letter to the kitchen board, next to Sophie's chess sketch and my class syllabus. 3 pieces of paper, talking to one another like good neighbors. By month's end, I sent the second check to Greenbridge, and another envelope to Teresa Clark, including a copy of the PD letter she had sent. It read, "We acknowledge the earlier error. Future calls must reference this date." I added my own line of thanks in careful handwriting, the kind I used when I wanted something to last. She sent back a picture of her dog sitting beside a stack of files, with the caption, "My dog agrees with your paperwork." I replied, "The highest honor." That night, before sleep, I no longer rehearsed conversations. I didn't replay the backyard. I didn't argue with the fence. I had work in the morning. Class, the shelter, the mailbox, the kettle, and a tiredness heavy enough that I didn't need to dramatize it. If you expect a dramatic ending, you've misheard the story. I only have this: the clink of a letter leaving my hand, entering the system, the snap of a file folder closing, its copies and confirmations forming the shape of a man, the whisper of a tree in another yard, still called by the name once given by a boy I loved and a father I am still learning to become around him. We are nearly finished. Not with life, but with pretense. The last stage of the game is always the quietest, and if you pay attention, it is also the most beautiful. 90 days is no longer just a number. It is a fragile bridge between shadow and light, a prescription bottle, the span between who a man claims to be and what the calendar will permit. On the 91st morning, I rose before dawn, brewed a cup of coffee I no longer had to earn, and saw the file resting on the chair by the door, closed like a book already knowing its ending. The kettle gleamed, polished. Some things know how to shine once you stop apologizing to them. At 11:57, I sat by the window of the diner. Maria Lopez poured coffee into my cup without asking. "You're waiting for someone," she said, the way a woman running a diner knows more than any calendar app. "He'll come," I said. "He will," she nodded, leaving me with a steaming cup of coffee, honest as a machine built for nothing else. Michael Hale walked in at 12:05, not late enough to be dramatic, not early enough to demand credit. The diner glowed in a dim yellow haze. Greasy tables reflected the light like tired mirrors. Outside, a bus screeched and exhaled like some worn-out animal. The air carried the smell of old oil and burned toast. The regulars spoke in low voices, no one looking at anyone else. And when Michael opened the door, the room seemed to dip for a single heartbeat, as if it recognized something serious was about to happen before pretending it hadn't. "Dad," he said. "Michael," I answered, nodding toward the chair as though it belonged to him, but only for as long as he Saturday. He didn't order right away. He pressed both palms flat against the table, sweat smearing the wood. His fingers trembled almost invisibly. His eyes tried to hold steady, but tiny fractures of unease glimmered like cracks in porcelain. "3 times now," he rasped. "I've paid on time every cent, and every time it feels like cutting off a piece of myself." "I know," I said, breathing slow. "That news reached me faster than the piece I've been trying to hold on to." He nodded faintly. "Thanks for the list. It was brutal." "Brutal is just another word for accurate," I replied. He managed a thin smile, not the kind that seeks approval. "The shelter makes me honest. Carla hates my tea." "She hates everyone's tea," I said. "That's her mission." We ordered tomato soup, rye toast, and grilled cheese meals that didn't care who was watching. I broke my habit, 2 cups of black tea. Michael ate like a man relearning the mechanics of chewing. Halfway through, he set down his fork, exhaling heavily. "I've got something to say, and I don't know how to say it without sounding like a confession." "Try the truth," I said. It's shorter. He studied his hands. The small scars, a nick from a skateboard, a faint line from a can opener lay across his skin like a silent journal, the kind only a father would bother to read. I thought I loved performing, he said. Turns out I just loved being graded easy. At the shelter, nobody claps when you mop the floor. They just stop slipping. I like that. He paused, then added, because men always add an "and" when they're clawing their way back to themselves. And I used to be angry at you. For the house, for the way you handled me, for your silence, for the red stamp slamming shut doors I thought I could charm open with a smile. I wanted that anger to turn into hate. But the harder I tried, the more I kept hearing your name tied to logic I couldn't escape. A side effect of applause, he added with a small, unforced laugh. Perhaps, I said. He pushed his plate away and leaned forward. I know about the debt. The tea beneath my hand went cold at once. What do you think you know? I think you bought a debt I dismissed as rumor, he said evenly. I think you could have crushed me, but you didn't. Instead, you drew up a schedule, handed me a mop, and used the interest to pay for heat and shoes. He met my eyes. Henry didn't tell me. Carla did. She said, some old man made sure the freezer stayed full when she saw me hauling a box that wasn't mine. You shouldn't have asked her, I said. I didn't, he answered. She saw me looking for shortcuts. I let silence drop between us, heavy and exact, like a coin falling perfectly into place. I had never intended for the truth to surface. But secrets keep their own calendars. They mature, then demand to be named or buried. I could have destroyed you, I said, not gloating, just clear. I never wanted you to destroy me, he whispered. I just wanted you to be on time. He nodded then, like a man swallowing a pill he knew he had to take. You chose the dull knife, the one that cuts clean but forces a man to walk out of the kitchen on his own legs. That knife is called a ledger, I said, and it's sharpened with seals. I deserved worse, he murmured. You deserve something else, I replied. Worse only keeps you standing still. Around us, the diner carried on, forks against porcelain, laughter without audience, a bus sighing outside. There's more, he said, about the house. I waited. He had earned the right to speak. Last night, I went back, he said. Not to break anything, just to prove it still knew how to breathe, how to sing even without my name on it. He drew in a breath. Thomas and Evelyn Carter were on the porch, wrapped in blankets, listening to an old radio playlist before life got ironic. Evelyn waved me up. I refused. She brought down 2 mugs anyway, as though that was enough. He sighed, long and low. She asked if I had any instructions about the house. I told her the attic sings when the wind blows. She said, we like a house that tells the truth. Then she asked what name the maple tree should carry. I couldn't help but smile. And what did you say? I told her it already had one, he said, meeting my eyes. I told her it was named Coach. My throat did what old men's throats do when the past comes back gentle and worthy. That's the right name. I stood there until the tea went cold, he said. Then I walked back to my rented place without a single brave line. I still don't know how to live inside a beautiful story without pretending I wrote it. You just did, I said. He left cash on the table out of habit. I pushed it back out of reflex. My treat. That's the deal. He nodded. A deal only matters when kept. At the door, he turned back, his voice slipping into that of the 8-year-old boy who once needed to make sure I was still me. Dad, yes. I'll be late, sometimes late to being decent, but I'll stop pretending I can't hear my own laughter when it's wrong. Good, I said. That laughter is the debt you're paying. He left. No one in the diner looked up. I sat with an empty plate, a folded bill, and a silence that needed no witnesses. In the glass pane, I saw an old man lifting a cup of tea without spilling. Not a hero, not a victor. Just a father who had chosen the dull knife to keep his son alive, and a man finally fitting inside his own skin, in a room small enough to be honest. In the end, what remains after all the disputes, losses, and old wounds is not money, status, or even a house. It is the simple truth. Every person must learn to pay their own price and stand firmly on their own 2 feet. A father's love is not endless shelter, nor silent endurance. It is teaching a child that life always comes with a cost, and only by facing it with courage can we truly grow. If you are listening to this story and find pieces of yourself in Michael, remember this: anger will fade, mistakes will become lessons, but family and kindness are the only things that endure when every other door has closed. Don't wait until it's gone to recognize its worth. And now, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below. What expensive lesson have you had to learn in your own life, and how did it change you? Share your story. It may become the light that guides someone else. If this story touched you, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and watch the next video appearing on your screen, where another story, with even more hidden corners, is waiting to be revealed.